I was folding laundry in my living room when my phone rang. It was my only daughter, Claire. Her voice sounded different. Cold. Like she was reading from a script. "Mom, Derek and I are flying to Spain tomorrow. I already sold your beach house and Dad's truck. We needed the money for the investment. Bye." And she hung up. Just like that. 43 years I raised her. 43 years of sacrifices, of putting her needs before mine, of being the mother who never said no. And she discarded me like yesterday's newspaper with a 30-second phone call. But I took a deep breath and smiled. Because there was something my dear daughter didn't know. My name is Margaret Hayes. I'm 68 years old. And until that moment, I thought I knew my daughter. I became a widow 8 months ago. My husband Daniel died of a heart attack while we were having breakfast, just like we had done every morning for 45 years. That morning, he had made me coffee with cream, exactly the way I liked it. He had kissed my forehead and said, "Good morning, beautiful." Those were his last words to me. Since then, Claire had been more present in my life. Or so I believed. She came to visit 3 times a week. She helped me sort through Daniel's belongings. She drove me to doctor's appointments. She even suggested I sell the beach house because it was too much responsibility for a woman your age. "Mom, you can't keep up 2 properties," she'd say with that smile I thought was concern. Now I understood it was calculation. The beach house had been our sanctuary. Daniel and I bought it when Claire was 12, with money we'd saved for 10 years. Every summer we'd go there. Claire would bring friends, then boyfriends, then Derek. I would cook for everyone, clean up after them, do their laundry. It was our family tradition. I never imagined she saw it as just a commodity to be sold. And Dad's truck. That old Ford F-150 Daniel had babied for 20 years. He'd wash it every Sunday, change the oil religiously, park it in the same spot under the oak tree. Claire knew what that truck meant to me. His coffee cup was still in the holder. His work jacket was still behind the seat. When she hung up, I sat there on my worn sofa, surrounded by half-folded towels, with other people coughing and sneezing around me at the laundromat. And for the first time in 8 months, I didn't cry. Something strange happened inside me. A calmness I hadn't felt since Daniel's death. Because in that moment, I remembered something I had completely forgotten. 5 days before he died, Daniel had handed me a thick manila envelope. "Margaret, put this in your dresser drawer. If something happens to me, open it when you're ready. But only when you feel strong enough." I had tucked it away without much thought. After the funeral, drowning in grief and arrangements and Claire's sudden helpfulness, I simply forgot about it. But it was waiting for me at home. The nurse called my number for my checkup. The doctor examined me and said I was in excellent health for my age, just needed to walk more and eat better. I nodded and smiled, but my mind was elsewhere. I was thinking about that envelope. About the coldness in Claire's voice. About how Derek had probably orchestrated all of this. He'd never liked me. He always looked at me like I was an obstacle between him and something he wanted. I took the bus home. I no longer had a car, according to my daughter. But as I watched the city pass by through the dirty window, I couldn't help but smile. There was something poetic about all of this. My daughter thought she had left me with nothing. But what she didn't know was that Daniel, my careful, quiet Daniel, had always been a man who planned 3 moves ahead. When I got home, I went straight to my bedroom. I opened the dresser drawer, and there it was. The manila envelope, exactly where I'd left it 8 months ago. My hands trembled slightly as I picked it up. I could feel there were multiple documents inside, thick papers that rustled with importance. Daniel had written my name on the front in his neat architectural handwriting, Margaret Elizabeth Hayes. Open when you're ready. I sat on the bed we'd shared for 45 years and took a deep breath. It was starting to get dark outside. The house was filling with those familiar shadows that used to scare me after he died. But now they felt different. Protective, almost. I opened the envelope slowly, like unwrapping a gift I'd been waiting my whole life to receive. What I found inside would change everything. The first document I pulled out was a property deed. But not for the beach house. This was for a commercial building downtown. 6 stories, 12 units, all rented. And according to the paperwork, I was the sole owner. My hands shook as I kept reading. There were more deeds. A duplex in the University District. A small apartment complex near the hospital. A storage facility on the highway. 4 properties I never knew existed. Then came the bank statements. Accounts I'd never heard of, with numbers that seemed impossible. Daniel had been a city engineer for 40 years, but apparently, he'd also been investing every penny we saved. Every sacrifice we made, every vacation we didn't take, every new car we didn't buy, he had been multiplying in silence. And I never knew anything. At the bottom of the envelope was a letter in Daniel's handwriting. My eyes filled with tears as I read his familiar words. My dearest Margaret, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you, and I'm so sorry for that. Forgive me for keeping secrets, but I wanted to protect you from worry. Over the years, I invested our savings carefully. We don't just have the beach house, my love. We have 6 properties generating income every month. We have stock portfolios. We have bonds and CDs. You are wealthy, Margaret. You always were in spirit, but now you are on paper too. The letter went on. Daniel explained that he'd kept everything secret because he didn't want our lifestyle to change, didn't want Claire to know about our real financial situation. You know our daughter, Margaret. If she knew we had real money, her whole attitude would shift. I want her to love us for who we are, not what we have. I want her to build her own life, not wait for ours to end so she can inherit. Keep this secret as long as you can. Use it wisely. And remember, you are stronger than you think you are. The irony was crushing. Our daughter had just robbed me, thinking I had nothing, when in reality I had everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house, touching the old furniture Claire had always criticized as outdated. I looked at family photos on the walls, especially one where she was 7 years old, sitting on Daniel's shoulders at the beach house, laughing like the world was magic. Where did that little girl go? When did she become this cold, calculating woman who could steal from her own mother? The phone rang the next morning. It was Claire again. Her voice was different now. Softer. But I had learned to distrust those shifts in tone. Mom, hi. How are you feeling? I wanted to tell you we already transferred the money from the house and the truck sale. We put your share in your account. It's not a lot, but it'll help you get by for a few months while you look for a smaller place to live. My share. How generous. I see, honey. And when do you leave? This afternoon. Our flight's at 5. We'll be gone at least 6 months, maybe longer if Derek's business opportunity works out. But don't worry, Mom. When we get back, we'll help you find a nice little apartment. Something manageable for someone your age. Something manageable. As if she had any idea what I could manage. That's very thoughtful, Claire. Oh, Mom, I knew you'd understand. You've always been so sweet about everything. We love you so much. I'll send you a postcard from Barcelona. And she hung up. I stood there with the phone in my hand. And for the first time in 8 months, I laughed. I laughed like I hadn't since Daniel died. The situation was so absurd it was almost funny. My daughter had robbed me, sold my memories, spoke to me with unbearable condescension, all to fund a European adventure that would probably be a disaster. But what hurt most wasn't the money. It was the ease with which she'd erased me from her life. 43 years of love. Sacrifice, a being there for every skinned knee and broken heart and bad test grade. And she'd deleted me with one phone call. That afternoon, I checked my bank account online. Sure enough, they'd deposited an amount that probably seemed generous to them. They'd sold the beach house for far less than it was worth, probably to a quick cash buyer. And they'd sold Daniel's truck for almost nothing. From my window, I watched Claire and Derek load suitcases into an Uber. She had a new designer carry-on. He was wearing expensive sunglasses. They were laughing, kissing, making plans. They looked like newlyweds excited for an adventure. They never looked toward my window. Never waved goodbye. When the car drove away, I sat at my kitchen table with tea and Daniel's documents spread in front of me. I had decisions to make. I could call a lawyer right now, reclaim everything, get back what they'd stolen. But something told me there was a better way. A more educational way. I called Peterson and Associates, the law firm that had handled Daniel's estate. James Peterson had been at the funeral. He'd told me to call if I ever needed anything. Well, now I needed him. Mrs. Hayes, it's good to hear from you. How can I help? Mr. Peterson, I need to see you urgently. I found some documents from Daniel that I don't quite understand, and I think my daughter may have done something illegal. There was a pause. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning? I'll be there at 9. That night, for the first time in 8 months, I slept soundly. I dreamed of Daniel. He was sitting in his favorite chair, reading the newspaper like he did every Sunday morning. When he saw me, he smiled and said, "It's about time, Maggie. It's about time you stood up for yourself." I woke up with a feeling I hadn't felt in years. Not quite happiness. Something better. Determination. For the first time since Daniel's death, I had a clear purpose. I was going to get back what was mine. But not the way Claire expected. This was going to be a lesson she'd never forget. The morning after Claire's call, I woke up before dawn. Not because I couldn't sleep. Because I didn't want to waste another minute being the victim of my own daughter's greed. I made coffee the way Daniel used to make it. Strong. Black. No sugar. I sat at the kitchen table where we'd shared 45 years of breakfasts, and I spread out every single document from that envelope. I needed to see exactly what I had. Exactly what Claire thought she'd stolen from a helpless old widow. The list was staggering. The beach house she'd sold? I still technically owned it because the deed was in a trust Daniel had created. She'd had no legal right to sell it. The truck? Same situation. Everything had been protected in ways I didn't understand yet, but I was about to learn. I took out my calculator and a notepad. Time to do what Daniel always called running the numbers. Monthly rent from the downtown building, $6,200. The duplex near the university, $2,400. The apartment complex, $8,900. The storage facility, $3,100. Total monthly income from properties I didn't know I owned, $20,600. Every single month. Whether I did anything or not. I stared at that number until my coffee went cold. $20,600. That was more than Daniel and I had earned together when we were both working full-time. Then I looked at the investment accounts. Stock portfolio, $437,000. Bonds, $212,000. Retirement accounts I'd never touched, $683,000. My hands were shaking as I wrote down the final total. Not from fear. From rage. $1,332,000 in liquid assets, plus properties worth at least another $2 million. Claire had sold my memories for quick cash while I was sitting on over $3 million. The phone rang. Unknown number. I let it ring. It rang again 5 minutes later. Different number. I didn't answer. Then a text came through from Claire's number. Mom, just checking you got the deposit. Let me know you're okay. I deleted it without responding. For 43 years, I'd jumped every time she called. Dropped everything when she needed me. Today, she could wait. My appointment with Mr. Peterson was at 9. I got dressed carefully. Not in the old cardigan and comfortable pants I'd been wearing since Daniel died. I put on the navy dress I'd worn to his funeral. The good pearls. The heels that hurt my feet but made me feel powerful. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone I hadn't seen in 8 months. A woman who wasn't broken. A woman who was done being convenient. Peterson and Associates was downtown in one of those old buildings with marble floors and dark wood paneling. Mr. Peterson met me in the lobby himself. He was younger than I expected, maybe 50, with kind eyes that reminded me of Daniel. Mrs. Hayes, please come in. Can I get you coffee? Tea? Coffee, thank you. Black. We sat in his office. He had photos of his family on his desk. 2 teenage daughters, a wife with a warm smile. I wondered if they knew how lucky they were. I handed him Daniel's envelope. He pulled out the document slowly, his expression changing with each page he read. Mrs. Hayes, this is extraordinary. Your husband was remarkably thorough. These trusts are ironclad. The property transfers were done years ago. Everything is protected from creditors, from legal claims, from... He paused. From family members who might try to take advantage. My daughter sold the beach house yesterday. And my husband's truck. She called to tell me they needed the money for a business investment in Spain. Mr. Peterson's jaw tightened. Did she have power of attorney? I signed something a few months ago. After Daniel died. She said it was to help with estate paperwork. I was so confused with grief, I just signed where she pointed. He made a note. That changes things. But Mrs. Hayes, the good news is the beach house sale is completely void. Your daughter didn't own that property. It was held in a trust with you as the sole beneficiary. Whoever bought it is going to be very unhappy when they find out the sale was fraudulent. Can we get it back? We can do better than that. We can prosecute for fraud. Your daughter forged documents or misrepresented ownership. That's a felony. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I don't want her arrested, Mr. Peterson. I want her educated. He looked at me carefully. What exactly do you want, Mrs. Hayes? I want the house back. I want the truck back. I want every penny she took returned. And I want her to understand what it feels like to lose everything because someone you trust betrays you. I paused. But I want to do this strategically. Not with revenge. With consequences. Mr. Peterson smiled for the first time. Mrs. Hayes, I think your husband would be very proud of you right now. Let me make some calls. Can you come back tomorrow? I'll be here. I left his office feeling lighter than I had in months. On the street, I passed a salon I used to go to before Daniel died. Before I let myself become invisible. On impulse, I walked in. Do you have any openings today? The stylist, a young woman named Jasmine, looked at my gray hair that I hadn't had cut in 8 months. Honey, for you? I'll make time. When was your last appointment? My husband's funeral. 8 months ago. Her expression softened. Then let's make today about you. What do you want? I want to look like someone who doesn't take crap from anyone anymore. 2 hours later, I walked out with styled silver hair, manicured nails, and makeup that made me look 10 years younger. I barely recognized myself. But I liked what I saw. That afternoon, my phone rang 8 times. All unknown numbers. Claire was getting desperate. I didn't answer any of them. Each ignored call felt like a tiny victory. At 4 p.m., a text came through, Mom, please answer. We need to talk. It's urgent. I turned my phone off completely. Let her panic. Let her wonder. Let her feel one fraction of the anxiety she'd caused me. I made myself dinner. Real dinner, not the frozen meals I'd been eating for months. Chicken with roasted vegetables. A glass of wine. I ate slowly, savoring each bite, sitting at the table like a human being instead of standing at the counter like someone who didn't matter. After dinner, I took Daniel's letter out again and read it one more time. You are stronger than you think you are. He'd always said that to me when I doubted myself. When Claire was difficult as a teenager. When his mother criticized my housekeeping. When I felt small and invisible. He'd been preparing me for this moment. He'd given me the tools. Now I just had to use them. The doorbell rang at 8 p.m. I checked the peephole. It was my neighbor, Helen, holding a casserole dish. Margaret, I saw your lights on. I made too much lasagna. Thought you might want some company? Helen had been bringing me food since the funeral. She'd lost her husband 3 years ago. She understood the particular loneliness of widowhood. Come in, Helen. I just made coffee. We sat in the living room. Helen looked at me closely. You look different. Good different. What happened? And I told her everything. The phone call. The envelope. The properties I didn't know I had. Claire's betrayal. My plan with Mr. Peterson. When I finished, Helen was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, my daughter did something similar to me. Not as dramatic, but the same basic idea. Tried to get me to sign over my house because I was too old to manage it. Said she'd take care of everything. What did you do? I told her no. She didn't speak to me for 2 years. Best 2 years of my life, honestly. When she finally came back, it was without the manipulation. She'd learned I wasn't a resource to be managed. I was her mother, and that meant respect or nothing. Do you regret it? Not for 1 second. Margaret, the hardest thing about being a mother is knowing when to stop mothering. When to let them face consequences. Claire needs to learn that actions have costs. You're doing the right thing. After Helen left, I sat in the quiet house and thought about what she'd said. I'd spent 43 years protecting Claire from consequences. When she failed a class, I talked to the teacher. When she crashed her car, I paid for repairs. When she needed money for her wedding, I emptied my savings. I'd taught her that mom would always fix everything. That mom was an endless well of resources with no needs of her own. That mom didn't matter except as a solution to problems. I'd created this monster. Now I had to uncreate it. My phone was still off. I plugged it in and watched 17 missed calls and 12 text messages load. All from unknown numbers. Claire was calling from every phone she could find. The last text said, "Mom, I'm really scared. Please answer. Something's wrong with the house sale. The buyer is saying there's a problem with the deed. Please call me back." There it was. She'd discovered the sale was fraudulent. And her first instinct was to call me to fix it. To make the problem go away. Just like always. This time I wasn't going to fix it. This time, she was going to fix it herself. Or more accurately, she was going to learn that some things can't be fixed. Some betrayals have permanent consequences. I sent one text back, "I'm fine. Busy with some legal matters. Will call when I have time." Then I turned the phone off again. Tomorrow, Mr. Peterson would file the paperwork to void the sale. To reclaim the truck. To freeze any accounts Claire might have accessed with that power of attorney she'd tricked me into signing. Tomorrow, my daughter would learn that her elderly, convenient mother was actually a woman with resources, with lawyers, and with a spine made of steel. I went to bed early. But before I did, I walked to Daniel's side of the closet and pulled out his old flannel shirt. I held it to my face and breathed in the faint smell of his cologne still clinging to the fabric. "Thank you," I whispered. "For protecting me even after you were gone. For believing I could do this. I hope I'm making you proud." The shirt didn't answer. But somewhere in the quiet darkness of the house, I felt his presence. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that he was smiling. 3 days after I stopped answering Claire's calls, I came home from the grocery store to find 2 cars parked in my driveway. One was a rental. The other I didn't recognize. But through my living room window, I could see movement inside my house. My blood ran cold. Someone was inside my home. I'd given Claire a key years ago for emergencies. She'd promised it was just for safety. In case something happens to you, Mom. Now she'd used it to break into my house because I wouldn't answer her desperate calls. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and walked through my own front door like I was entering a battlefield. The scene in my living room looked like an intervention from a television drama. Claire was pacing like a caged animal, her designer clothes wrinkled from travel. Derek sat on my sofa with his head in his hands, looking nothing like the confident man who'd helped steal from me. And standing at my dining table, going through papers I'd left out, was a man in an expensive suit I'd never seen before. What is happening here? My voice came out louder than I'd intended. All three of them jumped like I'd fired a gun. Claire rushed toward me. "Mom, thank God. We've been trying to reach you for 3 days. Why haven't you been answering your phone?" "I've been busy." "That doesn't explain why you're in my house without permission." I looked at the stranger rifling through my papers. "And who is this man going through my private documents?" The man stepped forward with an oily smile that made my skin crawl. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm Gerald Fisher. I'm a family attorney. Your daughter and son-in-law consulted about your situation." "My situation?" I set my grocery bags down carefully. "What situation would that be?" Claire's voice took on that syrupy tone she used when she wanted something. "Mom, we're worried about you. Your behavior has been really strange lately. First, you don't answer our calls. Then we find out you've been meeting with lawyers. The bank told Derek you've been asking about account access and changing passwords. So she'd been checking up on me. Calling my bank. Probably calling my neighbors too. I'm 73 years old, Claire. I'm allowed to manage my own finances without reporting to you." Derek finally spoke, his voice shaking. "Mom, we just want to help. The house sale fell through because of some problem with the deed. The buyer is threatening to sue us. We need to figure out what's going on." "The problem," I said calmly, "is that you sold a house that wasn't yours to sell." Mr. Fisher stepped forward, his briefcase open on my dining table. "Mrs. Hayes, that's actually what we need to discuss. Your daughter and son-in-law are facing serious legal consequences because of irregularities with that sale. But we're also concerned about your cognitive state. At your age, episodes of confusion are perfectly normal." There it was. The real reason they'd brought a lawyer. They weren't here to apologize. They were here to declare me mentally incompetent so they could take control of everything. "I see." I walked to my dining table and gathered up the papers Mr. Fisher had been reviewing. "And you felt comfortable going through my private documents because you think I'm confused?" Claire touched my arm. "Mom, honey, we love you. We just think maybe you need help managing things. Living alone in this big house. Dealing with finances you don't understand. It's a lot for someone your age." "Someone my age." I pulled my arm away from her touch. "Is that what you call a woman who raised a child alone for 10 years after her husband died? Who worked 2 jobs to pay for that child's college? Who sacrificed everything so that child could have the life she wanted?" "That's not fair, Mom." Claire's voice cracked. But I'd learned to recognize crocodile tears. "We're trying to help you." "Help me?" I laughed, and it sounded harsh even to my own ears. "Let me tell you what help looks like. Help is calling to check on me because you care, not because you need something. Help is visiting without going through my financial documents. Help is not selling my home and my dead husband's truck and calling it a favor." Mr. Fisher pulled papers from his briefcase. "Mrs. Hayes, we've prepared some documents that could make this transition easier. A power of attorney that would allow Claire and Derek to manage your finances more efficiently. Just temporarily, until you feel better." He slid the papers across my dining table. I picked them up, read the first few lines, and did something I'd never done in my entire life. I tore them in half. Then in quarters. Then I threw the pieces in the trash can. "Get out of my house. All three of you." "Mom, please." Derek stood up, his face red. "We can't just leave. We have obligations. The house buyers are demanding their money back. The truck buyer found out the title was fraudulent. We used that money for the Spain tickets and the apartment deposit. If we don't fix this, we could be charged with fraud. Then I guess you should have thought about that before you stole from me. Claire's mask finally slipped. Her voice went cold, her eyes hard. This is ridiculous, Mom. Everything you have will belong to us eventually anyway. We're just speeding up the process. You don't need a beach house. You don't need Dad's truck. You're not going to live forever. There it was. The truth, naked and ugly. To my own daughter, I was already dead. I was just an obstacle between her and my money. Out. I pointed to the door. Now. Mr. Fisher packed his briefcase with practiced efficiency. Mrs. Hayes, this isn't over. Your family has legal options. If you are indeed making irrational financial decisions due to diminished mental capacity, a judge can determine that you need guardianship. Mr. Fisher, I suggest you research your clients more carefully before you threaten a woman who's been managing her own affairs for 73 years. A woman who raised a family, ran a household, and worked until retirement. A woman who, until last week, was financially supporting two fully capable adults who repaid her by stealing her property. I walked to the front door and opened it. I'll give you all 30 seconds to leave before I call the police and report a break-in. They left, but not quietly. Claire was crying, but I could see the rage beneath her tears. Derek was muttering about lawyers and rights. Mr. Fisher looked merely annoyed that his easy payday had evaporated. As Claire reached the door, she turned back one last time. Mom, this is going to end badly for you. You're going to be alone with no one to take care of you when you really need it. Is that what you want? Claire, I'm already alone. The difference is now it's by my choice, not by your neglect. I closed the door and locked it. Then I added the chain lock for good measure. Through the window, I watched them stand in my driveway arguing, their voices rising and falling. Finally, they got in their cars and drove away. My hands were shaking. Not from fear. From adrenaline. I'd just had my first real confrontation with my daughter in 43 years, and I'd won. I called Mr. Peterson immediately. They were in my house, going through my papers. They brought a lawyer who was trying to get me declared incompetent. Did you sign anything? I tore up their papers and threw them in the trash. He laughed. Good. Mrs. Hayes, I'm going to file for a temporary restraining order today. They won't be able to come within 500 feet of you or your property. And I'm also going to accelerate the fraud charges. They need to understand this isn't a game. After I hung up, I walked through my house, checking every room, making sure nothing was missing. They'd been through my bedroom, through Daniel's office, through the kitchen drawers. Looking for what? Bank statements? Investment papers? Proof I was as helpless as they wanted me to be? In Daniel's office, I found they'd opened his filing cabinet. Documents were slightly out of order. They'd been looking for something specific. Probably the trust papers that proved the beach house wasn't mine to give them. I sat in Daniel's old chair and looked at the family photos on his desk. Claire at 5, missing her front teeth. Claire at 12, braces and attitude. Claire at 20, graduating college. Claire at 28, wedding day, looking at Derek like he was her future. Where had I gone wrong? When did love become obligation? When did family become transaction? The phone rang. Unknown number. I didn't answer. It rang again 5 minutes later. Different number. I let it go to voicemail. The voicemail was from Claire, calling from someone else's phone. Her voice was different now. Not cold, not desperate. Angry. Mom, you're making a huge mistake. We know you talked to a lawyer. We know you're trying to press charges. But you don't understand what you're doing. Derek has debts. Real debts. We needed that money. If we can't pay it back, bad things are going to happen. And it'll be your fault. I saved the message. Mr. Peterson would want to hear it. It was practically a confession. That night, my neighbor Helen knocked on my door with a bottle of wine. I saw the commotion earlier. Are you okay? I told her everything. Helen listened, nodding occasionally, her expression getting harder with each detail. She tried to have you declared incompetent? Margaret, that's elder abuse. You know that, right? I know. Mr. Peterson is handling it. Good. Because that girl needs to learn that mothers aren't unlimited resources. We're human beings with rights and feelings and, apparently, really good lawyers. We drank the wine. We talked about our daughters, about disappointment, about the moment you realize your child isn't who you thought they were. Helen had been through this. She understood the particular grief of being betrayed by someone you'd literally given life to. It gets easier, Helen said as she left. Not better. But easier. You learn to live with the disappointment. And sometimes, if you're lucky, they learn and come back different. Better. But that's rare. After she left, I stood in my quiet house and realized something. I wasn't afraid anymore. For 8 months, I'd been afraid of everything. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of making decisions without Daniel. Afraid of being a burden to Claire. Now I was afraid of nothing. Or maybe I'd just learned there were worse things than being alone. Like being with people who only loved you for what you could give them. I didn't know it then, but Claire's visit was the last time she'd have easy access to me. Tomorrow, Mr. Peterson would file the restraining order. Tomorrow, the real legal battle would begin. Tomorrow, my daughter would learn that the elderly woman she'd tried to rob had teeth. But tonight, I was going to sleep soundly in my own house, with my doors locked and my conscience clear. 2 weeks after Claire's invasion of my home, I sat in a courthouse waiting room wearing the navy dress that had become my armor. Mr. Peterson sat beside me, reviewing documents in a leather folder. The restraining order hearing is first, he explained. Then we'll address the fraud charges. The district attorney is very interested in elder financial abuse cases. I don't want to be a statistic, Mr. Peterson. I want to be a lesson. When they called our case, we entered a courtroom that smelled of old wood and broken families. The judge was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and reading glasses. This is a petition for a restraining order, Judge Morrison said. Mrs. Hayes is requesting that her daughter and son-in-law stay 500 feet away. That's quite serious. Mr. Peterson, what's the basis? Mr. Peterson stood. Your Honor, the respondents used a fraudulent power of attorney to sell property that didn't belong to them. When my client discovered the theft and stopped responding, they broke into her home and attempted to have her declared mentally incompetent. Judge Morrison looked at Claire over her glasses. Is this accurate? Claire stood, her voice shaking. Your Honor, I have a key my mother gave me for emergencies. We were worried about her. And the property sale? Claire's lawyer stood. There was a misunderstanding about ownership based on a power of attorney she'd signed. The beach house was held in an irrevocable trust, Judge Morrison said, reading from her screen. The respondents had no authority to sell it. These sales were fraudulent on their face. She looked at Claire. I'm granting the restraining order for 6 months. No contact whatsoever. I'm also referring this to the district attorney for prosecution. It was over in 15 minutes. As we left the courtroom, I glimpsed Claire's face. She was crying, but beneath the tears, I saw calculation. She was already planning her next move. 3 days later, Claire's story appeared on a local news website. Elderly woman turns against daughter over property dispute. The article painted me as vindictive, possibly suffering from dementia. The comments section was brutal. Strangers called me ungrateful, cruel, heartless. Each comment hurt, but each also reminded me that public opinion didn't matter. The law mattered. The truth mattered. 2 days after the article, my priest called. Father Michael had baptized Claire, married her to Derek, buried Daniel. Margaret, I saw the article. This must be difficult. I wonder if there might be room for reconciliation. She's your only child. She tried to have me declared mentally incompetent so she could steal everything. Tell me, Father, what would be just in that situation? There was a long pause. I understand you're hurt. But holding on to anger will only harm you. I'm not holding on to anger, Father. I'm holding on to justice. There's a difference. Mr. Peterson called that afternoon with news. The buyers of the beach house are suing Claire and Derek for fraud. The truck buyer filed a police report. This is snowballing. Good. Let it snowball. There's more. Derek owes money to some very unpleasant people. They're putting pressure on him to pay up immediately. So Claire's voicemail had been telling the truth. They'd stolen from me to pay off criminals. 2 weeks later, Mr. Peterson called with the news I'd been waiting for. The district attorney is filing charges. 3 counts of elder financial abuse, 2 counts of fraud, 1 count of identity theft. If convicted, serious prison time. When? Arraignment is next week. Mrs. Hayes, are you sure? Once filed, there's no taking it back. Your daughter will have a criminal record. I thought about Daniel's letter. About the little girl in my dream who'd trusted me to protect her. Mr. Peterson, I spent 43 years protecting my daughter from consequences. If I drop these charges, I'm teaching her the same lesson one more time. That she can do anything without punishment. So we proceed? We proceed. Not because I hate her. Because I love her enough to let her face what she's done. The arraignment was on a Tuesday. I didn't attend. Mr. Peterson called afterward. They pled not guilty. Trial is set for 4 months. Derek looked terrified. Claire looked angry. They're trying to negotiate a plea deal. What kind of deal? Restitution, probation, no jail time if they admit guilt and pay back everything. That evening, Helen and I sat on my porch watching the sunset. My phone had been quiet for weeks. Do you regret it? Helen asked. Which part? All of it. Pressing charges. Choosing justice over family. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my daughter became someone who could steal from her mother without remorse. But I don't regret standing up for myself. For the first time in my life, I chose myself. The sun set red and gold over my neighborhood. My life was uncertain. My daughter was facing prison because I'd finally said enough. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I was free. 4 months after the arraignment, I sat in the same courthouse where this had all begun. But this time, I wasn't in the waiting room. I was in the courtroom itself, sitting in the front row behind the prosecutor's table. The trial had lasted 3 days. 3 days of evidence, witnesses, and testimony that painted a devastating picture of what my daughter had done. Bank records showing the fraudulent sales. Expert witnesses explaining the trust structures Daniel had created. Character witnesses describing how I'd been perfectly lucid and capable when Claire claimed I was confused and declining. The hardest part had been listening to Claire's lawyer try to paint me as the villain. As a controlling mother who'd hidden assets from her daughter. As someone who'd set a trap and waited for Claire to fall into it. Some of it was even partially true, which made it hurt more. But today was verdict day. The jury had deliberated for 6 hours yesterday before the judge sent them home. This morning, they'd returned after only 30 minutes. That was usually a bad sign for defendants. "All rise," the bailiff called. Judge Morrison entered and took her seat. The jury filed in, not looking at Claire or Derek. Another bad sign. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Morrison asked. "We have, Your Honor." The foreman stood, a middle-aged woman who reminded me of Helen. She handed a paper to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. Judge Morrison read it without expression. "The defendant will rise." Claire and Derek stood. Claire was wearing a conservative blue dress, her hair pulled back. She'd lost at least 20 pounds during the trial. Derek looked like he'd aged 10 years. His expensive clothes hung loose on his frame. "On the count of elder financial abuse in the first degree, how do you find?" "Guilty, Your Honor." Claire's knees buckled. Derek caught her arm. "On the count of fraud in the first degree?" "Guilty." "On the count of identity theft?" "Guilty." Judge Morrison read through all the charges. "Guilty on every single one." When she finished, Claire was openly crying. Derek stood frozen, staring at nothing. "Sentencing will be in 2 weeks, Judge Morrison said. Until then, the defendants will remain free on bail." "Bailiff, we're adjourned." I sat there as the courtroom emptied. Mr. Peterson touched my shoulder. "Mrs. Hayes, we won. Everything you lost will be restored, plus damages. They'll likely get probation since it's a first offense, but they'll have felony records for life." "Thank you, Mr. Peterson." "Are you okay?" Was I okay? I'd just watched my only child be convicted of stealing from me. I just guaranteed she'd have a criminal record that would follow her forever. I just won a battle that meant I'd lost my daughter. "I don't know," I said honestly. As I left the courtroom, I saw Claire in the hallway. Derek was gone, probably calling a lawyer or his family. Claire sat alone on a bench, her head in her hands. She looked up when she heard my footsteps. Our eyes met for the first time in 4 months. "Mom," she said quietly. I stopped. Everything in me wanted to go to her, to comfort her like I had when she was small. But I also remembered the coldness in her voice when she'd called to tell me she'd sold my house. The calculation in her eyes when she'd broken into my home with that lawyer. "Claire. I'm sorry. I know it doesn't matter now, but I'm sorry." You were right about everything. About Derek, about the money, about me. When did you realize? About Derek? The second day we were in Spain. When he told me there was no business opportunity. That he just wanted to get away from his debts and I was his ticket out. She laughed bitterly. About myself? Today. When I heard that jury say guilty 12 times in a row and realized I'd destroyed my entire life for nothing. I sat down on the bench beside her, but not too close. What will you do now? I don't know. Derek's family has cut him off completely. My friends won't return my calls. I'll probably lose my real estate license because of the felony conviction. I have no money, no job prospects, and in 2 weeks I might be going to prison. She looked at me. I know I don't deserve to ask, but are you going to make a statement at sentencing? In criminal cases, victims could address the court before sentencing. My words could influence whether Claire got probation or actual prison time. I don't know yet. I understand. Claire stood. For what it's worth, Mom, I know Dad would be ashamed of me. I'm ashamed of me. I just wanted you to know that before whatever happens next. She walked away. I watched her go, this stranger who wore my daughter's face. Somewhere inside her was the little girl who'd sit on Daniel's lap and laugh. But that girl had made choices, one after another, that led her here. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house touching things. Daniel's chair. Claire's baby photos. The kitchen table where we'd shared thousands of meals as a family. I ended up in Daniel's office, sitting at his desk with his letter in my hands. I don't know if I did the right thing, I said to the empty room. She's our daughter, Daniel. Our baby. And I just sent her to prison. The house was quiet. No answers came. But as I sat there, I noticed something I'd never seen before. Behind Daniel's file cabinet was a small safe I didn't know existed. The combination was our wedding anniversary. Inside was one more letter. One more gift from my husband who'd thought of everything. My dearest Margaret, if you're reading this, it means the worst has happened. Claire has betrayed you, and you've had to make impossible choices. I'm sorry I left you to face this alone. But here's what I want you to know, you are not responsible for the adult your daughter became. You gave her love, support, guidance. She made her own choices. And now she has to face the consequences of those choices. That's not cruelty. That's life. But here's the question only you can answer, what happens after the consequences? Does punishment mean permanent exile? Or does it mean a chance to rebuild from the ground up? I can't tell you what to do. But I can tell you this, I built our fortune not just to protect you, but to give you choices. Whatever you decide, you'll have the resources to see it through. Trust yourself, my love. You're stronger and wiser than you know. With eternal love, Daniel. I read the letter 3 times. Then I called Mr. Peterson, even though it was nearly midnight. Mrs. Hayes? Is everything all right? Mr. Peterson, I need you to help me with something. It's going to sound crazy, but I need you to trust me. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of Judge Morrison at Claire's sentencing hearing. The courtroom was nearly empty. Just me, Mr. Peterson, Claire, Derek, their lawyer, and the prosecutor. Mrs. Hayes, Judge Morrison said, you have the right to make a victim impact statement. Would you like to address the court? Yes, Your Honor. I walked to the podium. Claire sat at the defense table, her hands folded, not looking at me. Your Honor, my daughter stole from me. She betrayed my trust, sold my memories, and tried to have me declared incompetent when I discovered what she'd done. The money didn't matter. The house didn't matter. What mattered was that she looked at me and saw only a resource to be exploited. Claire's shoulders shook. She was crying silently. But here's what I've learned over these past months. My daughter didn't become this person overnight. She became this person because I taught her that mom would always fix everything. That actions didn't have consequences. That love meant never saying no. I created someone who thought she could take whatever she wanted because mom would never fight back. I paused. This was the hardest part. So I'm asking you not to send my daughter to prison. She's been convicted. She has a felony record. She's lost everything she valued. She knows what she did was wrong. Prison won't teach her anything she hasn't already learned. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, the state objects. Judge Morrison held up her hand. Let her finish. Instead, I'm asking for probation with strict conditions. I want her to perform 1,000 hours of community service with elderly people. I want her to attend counseling. And I want her to pay restitution at a rate she can actually afford, even if it takes 20 years. Mrs. Hayes, the prosecutor said, this woman tried to steal your life savings. She tried, I agreed. But she failed. Because my husband was smarter than both of us and protected me even after his death. My daughter has lost everything. Her marriage, her career, her reputation, her freedom. Making her sit in a cell for 2 years won't give me back the daughter I lost. But maybe, just maybe, giving her a chance to rebuild might give us both something better. Judge Morrison looked at me for a long moment. That's very generous, Mrs. Hayes. It's not generosity, Your Honor. It's hope. Judge Morrison sentenced Claire to 5 years probation. 1,000 hours of community service, mandatory counseling, and restitution. Derek got the same. When it was over, Claire approached me in the hallway. Mom, I don't understand. Why would you do that for me after everything? Because you're my daughter. And because I finally understand what your father was trying to teach me. Love isn't about protecting people from consequences. It's about standing beside them while they face those consequences and helping them become better. I don't deserve. No, you don't. But love isn't about deserving. It's about choosing. And I choose to give you one more chance. Not to be the daughter you were, but to become the woman you should have been. Claire hugged me. Really hugged me, not the desperate grab from before but something genuine. I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving you didn't make a mistake. Good. You can start by helping me clean out the beach house. I'm turning it into a community center for widows. They'll need someone to manage it. Interested? She pulled back, shocked. You want me to work for you? I want you to work with me. Minimum wage until you've paid back what you stole. But it's honest work, and it's a start. 6 months later, I stood on the porch of the beach house watching Claire teach a group of elderly women how to use computers. She was patient, kind, completely focused on helping them. Helen stood beside me. You took a hell of a risk, Margaret. I know. But it's working. She's different. She was. Claire had cut her hair short, stopped wearing expensive clothes she couldn't afford, and moved into a small apartment she paid for herself. She called me every Sunday. Not to ask for anything, but just to talk. Daniel would be proud of you, Helen said. I don't know about that. I put our daughter through hell. You taught her something more valuable than money. You taught her that actions have consequences, but consequences don't have to be the end of the story. That night, I sat in Daniel's chair with a glass of wine and looked at our family photos. Claire at 5, at 12, at 28. And a new one, Claire at 43, standing with a group of elderly women at the community center, genuinely smiling. We did it, Daniel, I said to the empty room. We raised a daughter who made terrible mistakes. But we also raised a daughter who could learn from them. I think that's the best we could have hoped for. The house was quiet. My daughter was rebuilding her life. My husband's legacy was protecting people who needed it. And I, Margaret Hayes, 73 years old, was no longer the convenient widow everyone had ignored. I was the woman who'd said enough. And that made all the difference.